guys, welcome back to the Sanditon Chronicles. I'm your host Maureen, and we are joined today with Janice, and we are recapping episode 7 today, which is a favorite episode of mine, and Janice's special name for it is
Wills, Rowing, and Other Ups and Downs.
Ooh, wills meaning like
there's lots of meanings for wills, aren't there?
There are. Is that how you meant it, with several different meanings, or were you going somewhere specific?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so I like how we kind of start this episode with Georgiana.
We do?
Yeah, well, right near the beginning.
Yeah. I always think about that gathering at Sanditon House with Dr. Fuchs.
Oh, yeah, that does come first. I just watched this. I am telling you, man, this fog is insane. I literally watched it an hour ago.
They gather together, and he says that he doesn't think she'll live out the night.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Lady D, of course.
Yeah. And I like how many people are gathered there.
Yeah.
Tom and Mary don't say anything to her. They're just there to hear news, and then they leave. And then obviously right. Clara and Edward and Esther are there because they're family. But
yeah, the whole gang's all there.
And did you notice that when Clara says, "Oh, our poor aunt," like she's almost sounds joyful when she says it. Like her words are sorrowful, but the tone that she says them in is almost like, "Yay!"
Yeah. Well, she and Edward both are kind of openly happy about this.
I think Edward hides it a little bit better, especially when he's like, "Well, I better go pay my last respects," and then he goes in and talks to her.
Yeah.
I'm sure the moment he's in the hallway, he's just dancing like he does when he talks to Charlotte or to Esther later on.
Yeah, that's right. And then, of course, we see Tom and Mary in the carriage on the way back to town.
I love that conversation.
Yeah, finally.
Coming from where he had been hiding everything from her to a return to normal is really, really nice to see. And I love that transition of Mary too, where she's at first like almost offended at what he says. But then he says, "I'm just doing what you asked. I'm just telling you everything as honestly and transparent as I can. And this is why I hid it from you, because it was terrible."
And also, it obviously comes as a big shock to her, which, I mean, she's had a clue because of what else happened. But yeah, I don't think she really understood the seriousness of it.
No. I think she thought, just if we work together, we could fix this. Easy peasy is what I think she kind of thought.
And in that era, I guess a lot of women were very much protected from knowing anything about finances, or the assumption was that they wouldn't understand.
And he also actively hid everything from her. And even after it came out, he severely downplayed what the status was.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely.
And I think it's such a shame, because we know what the will says, and we know that if she dies, he gets all of her money for the town. So the fact that it's good that he doesn't want her to die. You don't want Tom to become that person. You don't want him to become like the others. And I think part of him would be sad to see Lady D die. I think that he has an attachment to her, and I think that he's a generally good person.
And he wants that support. Of course, it's during this episode we find out what the will says, because they find the will.
No, that's the last episode. That's when Clara and Edward burn it.
You're right. You're right. Now who has brain fog?
We're just gonna trade off in this episode.
Okay.
That's what we're doing.
Equal opportunity brain fog here. And then Sydney goes and visits Georgiana.
And I know we've talked about this before, and I know it's a sign of immaturity, but I hate how she treats Sydney this entire last 2 episodes. I hate it.
I agree.
When she says, "I don't want to see anyone, least of all you." Why? Because he saved you from that guy who was trying to steal you and illegally marry you?
Yeah, I think it's all about I've been embarrassed in her head, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And and you were right, and I hate that you were right.
Yeah.
I guess that's the only thing that makes sense to me about her reaction.
Well, I think too that Sydney has proven over and over again that she can be as nasty as she can be to him, and he's not leaving her. He's going to continue. I mean, she was pretty terrible to him right before he rescued her. And he still hunted her down and chased her down just so that he could save her. And so I think that part of her is so angry and so frustrated at at Otis leaving her and at this guy trying to take her, that I think part of her is saying, well, I can be as mean as I can be to Theo. I can take it out on him and he's still going to be there. But the flip side of that could also be that, you know, if I need to shove everyone away, who cares about me? Because clearly they're all going to leave me anyway.
Right. And she obviously, from what we hear later, she thinks that everybody knows about her big embarrassment. And, you know, that she's a ruined woman. Well, she isn't.
Yeah.
You know, but
self-reflective.
Yeah. It's all self-focused for her.
Yeah.
And I am going to be really interesting to see how they handle this situation of his guardianship without his presence.
For me, like, that's the biggest thing for me, because obviously you and I have accepted Theo James is done. Sydney is done. He's not coming back. So now, like, I keep talking about him and thinking about him because I'm incredibly curious how that's going to play out. Because even thinking of the brothers, like, he was an integral part of the brothers.
Right.
He kept them afloat. What is going to happen without him in the picture? Unless they do it correspondently, but that would be a weird way to keep him in.
I imagine it might be that way for at least part of the.
Yeah, just to close it up.
But at least until she reaches, you know, or somebody else has to take over the guardianship.
Yeah.
You know?
And honestly, I think that's the sign of a good show, that they have it figured out, but no one else can figure it out. You don't want it to be so predictive that we know exactly what's going to happen.
Yes, I think we can definitely agree that this show has not been predictive.
No, at all. It's constantly surprised me in what it did.
Yeah, definitely. And even when you get little hints, you still don't know.
Absolutely. And I'm the kind of person who, when I'm reading a book, if I'm invested in it, I get really anxious about the characters. I'll flip to the end to make sure they don't die, or to make sure that they're okay, just so I can finish reading the book.
Because and I have a tendency sometimes to just never quite finish it. I've realized that because I was thinking about all these books I have that I started and maybe even got 2/3 the way through, and I haven't finished. And I think psychologically, I don't want them to end.
Yeah.
And I you know, I've finished plenty of books, believe me, but it's just funny that these particular ones.
Yeah. It's like when you get in this, like, Jane Austen's world is one I get stuck in a lot, because I go through Pride and Prejudice every year, and not even on purpose. It just so happens that I happen to pick it up once a year because it makes me feel good. I like that book.
Right.
And I'll read it, but I don't want to I'm not ready to be done with her world yet. I'm not ready to be out of the chivalry and the gentlemanliness and the women who are able to break out. I'm not ready to get out of that. So I'll read fan fiction on it over and over, like stay up until 3 or 4 in the morning and just read every possible thing I can read about it. I'll watch the movies over and over and over again. And then I'll go on for months. And that's what I do with Sanditon. I wasn't ready to end its world. So I binge watched it over and over and over. And I cannot wait to start that book. But I feel like that's going to be the same thing. I feel like that book is going to be something I'm just going to start reading all the way over from the first part, especially because there's a new one coming out. So we know it's not done.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There's some little differences in the book, but it's good. Yeah.
But that's the good part, because then I'm not doing the same thing.
No, it's not. There's some places where it's exactly the same, but
yeah. But I think with Georgiana, she's going to be another interesting one to see how they alter her, because they're not going to keep her this same selfish mind. And she's selfish for a reason. She's not selfish for selfishness' sake. She's selfish because she's this terrified girl who's taken out of everything she knows, and she's young, and she doesn't know anything about the world.
Right. She does show in the episode we haven't discussed yet, that she does really care about Charlotte and her well-being.
Does she though?
Well, when she challenges Sydney.
But what does she say there? Do you remember what she says to him? You've ruined my happiness.
Oh, yeah.
How can I not trust you to ruin hers? So I don't even think that's about Charlotte, because Charlotte already told her she's happy with Sydney. So it's more about ruining Sydney's happiness than ensuring Charlotte's, I think.
Yeah, you could be right. And
I don't think she's a malicious character, though. I think she's a likable character, but she's just very stuck in her own head and her own problems and her own turmoil.
It's what we've said before. She's just immature. You know, she might be 19, but she's still a teenager.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to see how because they have to grow her for that second season.
Well, next story takes place 9 months later.
I know. And that's the other thing that has me curious is how much can you accomplish in 9 months with all these different characters, with Sydney being gone, with Eliza being gone, with Georgiana having to be where she needs to be. So it'll be really fun to see. But anyway, so he comes there and they talk, and I love that he's been so much softened by Charlotte.
Yes.
That he doesn't rise to her bait, because that's really what Georgiana's trying to get from him. She's trying to get a rise out of him because it makes her feel good.
Right.
But he just speaks to her in compassion and kindness. And I think that what this did for their relationship is having her be spurned in the same sort of way that he was spurned has given him a different viewpoint on Georgiana and how he can be speaking to her. But he wouldn't have been able to do it without Charlotte's interference.
Yes, I agree. And has really come to terms with the fact that he wasn't living up to his responsibility. And he says, I really want to make amends, and of course she says, men like you can't change. Yeah. So going on to, after we see Sydney visit Georgiana, the next thing we see is Charlotte walking down the street and runs into young Stringer, who is walking with his father, old Stringer, who is in the cart, because of course he's still recovering from the injury, from the fall.
And then we also have Fred there.
Yes, and Fred, of course, has
rapidly become one of my favorites.
Yeah.
I love his character.
Well, and Fred probably isn't, I don't know, but I'm guessing he's not in the show either.
No, I mean, I haven't heard one way or the other, but I don't, if the foreman is gone, you have to imagine that maybe a lot of the work that requires a lot of the townspeople has been completed.
Right. So the only male characters from the first season that we know are going to return are Tom and Arthur.
And Edward.
Oh, and Edward, of course. Yeah. Edward. Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, there weren't a lot of male leads or male parts in it to begin with, but old Stringer obviously is not coming back.
Yeah. There's Stringer, Babington,
Crow. We haven't heard one way or another about Crow either, but I assume if Babington and Sydney aren't going to be there, there's no reason for him to be there unless that deleted scene is going to play into the next seasons with him and Clara.
Yeah, we'll see. I'm not going to hold my breath on that one.
No.
I really like Matthew Needham. I think he's incredible.
Yeah, I love his role in this episode is so entertaining. Even the way he drinks from his tiny little circle flask is hilarious. I don't know. It's just his mannerisms get me almost more than anything else. I just love how he plays out his character. Lovable drunk Crow.
Yeah, he's great. And of course, so Charlotte and Stringer make this appointment to talk the next day. What is a more substantial conversation? Yeah.
I love Fred. Did you hear that, old Stringer? More substantial conversation.
And it's his way of digging at young Stringer too, at James.
And old Stringer just looks completely annoyed by this. Like, why are you even talking about this? This is completely useless. This is stupid.
Yeah.
And that's the start of what happens later on in the next episode. That is
he actually started it even earlier when he was, when she was there and she came to check on him. And he's sort of putting young Stringer down for trying to be above his station. So he was already, of that opinion at that point. But yeah, you're right. It definitely picks up more here.
Yeah, here it's not so much about Stringer as it is Stringer wanting to be with a gentleman's daughter.
Right.
And I think, I love that he doesn't even say any words. He just rolls his eyes and shakes his head and then they cut away. That's the last thing we see of them is Stringer's really irritated reaction. And then she goes and she runs into Sydney in the hallway. And what a cute scene is that?
That's a great scene.
And quiet and they're not calm at all. But the tones of their voice are just very, very quiet and reserved, even though you can tell that they're both very anxious to be running into each other.
Right. And he asks to wait for her. And then walks her and they're discussing things. And I love it. She says, "You're not nearly as unfeeling as you pretend." And of course he says, "Well, you have to keep my secret because I
I
have
have
to
a
maintain
reputation to protect.
exactly. I have a reputation to protect. And it's
Your
a
secret
funny
is safe
little
with
scene,
me.
but
But
yeah,
I like how much he's listening to her. And he even says to her, he gives her credit right off the bat when he says, I suspect you'll have more luck with her, when she asks how
mhm,
Georgiana is. And he's relieved, not because because I think before it was kind of him. Yeah, I think he was relieved because he did have attraction to Charlotte before, but he wasn't acknowledging that. And now it's relief in that Georgiana is actually going to get help from Charlotte. Charlotte's actually
right,
going to get through to Georgiana. And I don't think it was exactly that, at least not that he knew before. Before, I think it was just someone who occupied Georgiana's time.
right. Yeah, that's right.
And
He hadn't come to understand how much she had to
exactly.
offer, how capable,
Mm-hmm.
other than that one time when he said, I wouldn't have expected you to be so capable in episode 3. But he really finds out just how capable she is
Mm-hmm.
in episode 6. So,
Well,
yeah.
I think he started to, I think in episode 3, he began to see how capable she was. But
Oh, yeah.
episode 4 just kind of, I don't even think he forgot. I think that he just chose to ignore.
Well,
After episode 4.
he was really hurt in that
Yeah.
episode. Mhm.
But in this
Yeah.
one, when they're walking, I love not only just the quiet awkwardness of their first encounter in that hallway, but also when they're walking, how he is constantly looking over to her. So
Right.
he's actually trying to communicate with her in full by her facial. And yes, I know that these are scripted this way, but not everything, not every nonverbal cue is scripted. In fact, most of the nonverbal is not scripted. So the fact that Theo James put into his character that he was almost like yearning for a look to her face, for her to look up at him so he could see her face. And I thought that was just a really, really beautiful way to kind of grow their relationship to the audience. Because there was even one point where they're walking where Theo James or Sidney Parker not only looked at her, but he angled his head forward a little bit to kind of try to peek around where her head was hidden.
Right.
And I thought that was a really, really smart way to show, not tell, where he was.
Right. Yes, I agree. And at this point, I believe the book tells us he had stayed in London for a couple of weeks. And I think this is the first time they've encountered each other since he got back
Okay.
to Sanditon.
A couple of weeks sounds right, because James Stringer says something along those lines. He doesn't say a couple weeks, but he says it feels like a long time. I haven't talked to you since you've been back. And the way he says it makes you think it's been.
Yeah, I think they say a couple weeks in the book.
Okay, that makes sense. I'm glad they
Yeah.
give timelines like that, because those are things that I think about.
Right. It does make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the next scene where we see Clara and Esther outside of Lady D's room, and Clara starts wondering why it's taking Edward so long to come out, because there's not a lot he can discuss with his aunt.
Mm-hmm.
And then Esther and Clara get into the discussion about the will.
Yeah.
That Esther has been told doesn't exist.
I wonder if part of Clara saying anything at all, because the way she says it is, he sure is taking his time. So I wonder if part of that was her trying to get Esther to confide in Clara what she knows, and how much of it was just Clara wondering out loud if Edward was trying to run one last scheme with Lady Denham, or maybe a mixture of both. I don't know, but I'm curious about that.
Yeah, it's probably both. And she's I think she's trying to figure out what Esther knows.
Mm-hmm.
And
poor Esther.
Yeah.
Actually, no, not poor. This is a good thing. This is a good thing to happen, that she finds out exactly what he is.
Yeah, it's very hard on her during this period of time,
Mm-hmm.
but ultimately it's the best thing for her to find the truth. Yeah.
And
it's quite the conversation.
I don't think that Clara really relished in telling her in the way that people think that she did. I think that, and I've maintained this from the beginning, because there's no other reason why in episode, what was it? 4, maybe? When Clara
Choose where they Two's where they say she says we shouldn't be enemies.
No, it's
You're talking
when
about
she finds out. The episode where
Oh.
Clara finds out and she sees them together. I think it's episode 3 or 4. Might be 4.
I think it's 4, but anyway, I know
And
what you mean.
she goes outside and she says it happened with me once too. She's trying to help Esther out of this really toxic situation, that whether or not Esther realizes it, Clara is very much aware that there is a super inappropriate, really unhealthy thing happening here, and is trying to get Esther to see that. So I think that in this conversation in the hallway, I don't think it was all her just trying to wound Esther. I think it was partly her. I think it was multifaceted, but I think it was her trying to get Esther to see, this is who he is. Do you not understand that this is who he is yet? I think it had 2 purposes, though. I think one, it was because she thinks that Esther should see it so she can get out. But I think it's also, if Esther's out of the picture, then it's just between me and Edward for the inheritance money. So I think it is twofold, but I think it's still a level of protection there for Esther.
I think it's partially, I mean, I agree with you. I think Clara is doing a little bit of the, well, I know more than you do, you know, which is kind of a very adolescent, childish approach. But I think, yeah, because you're right. I mean, she probably feels like Esther needs to understand the truth of the matter, but she's already said to Edward in the previous episode that if Esther found this out, it would break her heart. Well, Clara's going to help break her heart.
Yeah. But I think for Clara, that's a good thing, because Clara came out of that where a family member was sexually assaulting her on a regular basis. And I think too, that she speaks that way to Edward because she knows exactly who Edward is. And Edward knows that she knows exactly what kind of guy he is.
And she manipulates him. I mean,
Without
she's
question.
kind of a born manipulator, you know. I mean, well, not born.
I think she's a made manipulator.
Exactly.
Out of necessity.
She has become one out of necessity and survival.
And I don't have the same view of Clara as a lot of people do. There's a lot of people that really see her as a villain and don't like her at all.
It'll be really interesting to see what her role is this time.
Yes. And I think her and Edward are I don't think they're ever gonna be romantic. Unless it's like an opportunity presents itself, but I don't think it's going to be an active let's be together kind of thing. I think it's going to be more like a partnership of let's see what we can accomplish together rather than let's be together.
I don't know. I have no clue where they're going to go with that. I really don't. Yeah. So Esther learns the truth, and
even the way Clara says it to her, though, Esther says you're lying, and she says we were lying on the drawing room floor, if you must know. Like, even the way she delivers it to her, Clara's not making herself look good at all. Clara's making herself look pretty cheap and pretty terrible and pretty unladylike, which is a huge deal then. And
right, and she says also to Esther, oh, could it be that you've never given yourself to him? Well, yeah, obviously she hasn't.
But she knew that too.
Well, she suspected it.
Yeah, because I mean, just the way that Esther has talked about Edward to Clara, I think that Clara was smart enough to figure out that what Edward was doing to her and how he was roping her in and how he was making her feel like she was the most important in the world. And I think that's why Clara phrased it as crassly as she did. Because there'd be no doubt
what she meant.
And what kind of person Edward is.
Right.
And I don't think she would make herself look so terrible if it wasn't in some way to try to force a point home.
Well, and also, I mean, of course, she lies again about how much Edward has agreed to give her. And she thinks the Lady D's going to be dead. And so she's not worried about how she would be made to look in Lady D's eyes, which is what she talked about all before, right? You know,
I don't think she exactly lied about the money, though. She did lie because it's not they agreed on. But remember when before they did, she said a fifth, and then she said a quarter share, and Edward said, "You said a fifth," and she said, "Yeah, well, a quarter share."
So she said a lady's privilege.
Yeah,
but the prerogative. But this time she says half.
But that's because she keeps upping it, because I think she thinks she can sway Edward that way. That's why she upped it from a fifth to a quarter.
Right, but it's still a lot.
It is a lot, yes.
That isn't what he agreed to. But of course, Edward lied to Esther too. And so Clara is gone, and then Edward comes out and announces that he thinks that, she's not long for this world, in that German accent.
And he giggles as he walks away. Like, it's actually in the subtitles. Chuckles softly is what the subtitles say as he walks away. Like, wow. Yeah, he definitely thinks that. And it's, so you see what good character Esther has when she goes in and bears her guilt and his betrayal to Lady D, who we think is sleeping, but obviously was hearing. Well, actually, I noticed today for the first time that when Esther is telling her, and maybe I'm just like over analyzing to the nth degree, but when she's telling her all about how she is wrongly only cared about her money, and that because of money everyone's been changed, like first Lady Denham's face is smooth and there's almost like a smile to her face, and then when it is shooting from the side of Esther holding her hand saying that she's gonna die unloved and unmourned and all the stuff, Lady Denham almost her brow looks like she's furrowed her brow. So there's two different aspects that so Lady D is actively listening, and her facial expressions are reacting to what Esther is saying. Well, whether or not it's because they filmed it different days, different hours, and they didn't remember, I don't know, but it's in there.
Well, I certainly know what it's like to wake up and have your eyes closed and hear people talking, and so that's entirely possible, but it also could have been in her subconscious mind, people hear things, but regardless, she definitely hears it. And so
the other thing there though too is that how many times are people fully that honest with Lady Denham? They're always trying to get things from her, they're always trying to deceive and manipulate, and she's not an idiot, so she's well aware of what they're doing. But here it comes Esther, who is bearing her soul and being more honest with her than anyone else has probably ever been with her, including her old love. So maybe, like, there's been times when people come in the room and I don't want to wake up yet, and they're like, hey, are you awake? And I won't answer them because I want them to think I'm still sleeping.
Right.
And I wonder if that's because Lady Denham was on the upswing. She wasn't still in a fever pitch coma. She was on the upswing. So I wonder if, and obviously this is conjecture, but I wonder if when Esther started to bare her soul to her, that Lady Denham was just like, okay, let's see what she has to say. And
whether it was conscious or subconscious, she definitely heard it and probably realized, how much more character Esther had than she thought. I mean, because before she just looked like a sourpuss most of the time.
And she even said, I mean, she owned up to my eternal shame, we only cared about your money.
Right.
Your money is a foul, corrupting cancer. Look what it's done to you. Look what it's done to Edward. And she'd already admitted that to her eternal shame, that's all she cared about. So she admitted right away it affected her. And she had said all these things about how she did say Edward betrayed us both. But in saying what she did about herself, she's also confessing to Lady Denham that she was also betrayed Lady Denham in wanting that money.
Oh yeah, she didn't just blame others.
Yeah.
She definitely, obviously she wasn't so as much into it as the other two.
Yeah.
She was, a kinder person about it. And like I told you before, the book actually says that Clara said to Edward, we can't tell Esther because she's got a conscience. Well, this is how they illustrate that.
Yeah.
The conscience that she has. So it's interesting. And so then we switch to seeing Tom and Charlotte discussing the regatta and what's going to happen in the regatta. And I love his response. Excellent, splendid, something for everyone to enjoy. I love that.
His mood is just so altered from the last time we see him.
Yeah. He says, now all we need is visitors. And then Sydney arrives with Eliza.
Well, first we see even how he's different with his family, because his son comes running in and tackles him to the ground, and he's actively playing with them. He's playing sword fight, because that happens right before he talks to Charlotte. He's actively talking with the son and playing with the son and being rough with the son. And it's such a weird occurrence now that his son wasn't that far into it when Tom was like, Mary, help me. I can't do this anymore. It had become such a rare occurrence that Tom couldn't even stick it out for that long. But he's as he is feeling more steady in Sanditon, he's able to actually be, I think this is the real Tom, the family man who is honest and open with his wife, who plays with his children, who gives his children affection and attention, and who is excited about the work he's doing. I think this is the real Tom, free of stress.
And hopeful. Yeah, I agree. So then, of course, the camera focuses on Charlotte walking up to try and peek around the corner and see Sydney reintroducing Eliza to Mary and Tom.
Yes.
And don't you love the way the girls are the ones who always announce who's arriving? We see that repeatedly.
Yes.
And I don't know if they're going to be in this or not. I haven't seen anything that says they're in the next two series, but it won't be the same without them, that's for sure.
Yeah. They might not have the same children. I think that oftentimes when they're young enough, they feel like they can get away with different kids. So
the characters, though.
Yeah.
We know the boy is
they can't explain that away.
But the boys are going to be there.
Yeah.
The boy, excuse me, the oldest boy. So it's real interesting. And the look that Sydney sees Charlotte, and it's one of the last scenes they filmed in the series, aside from the coach scene, at the very end in episode 8. But the look that Sydney gives Charlotte, it's like a mixture of guilt,
I'd say that, and
indecision.
It didn't look like indecision to me. It looked like a lot of sorrow. It looked like a lot of guilt and regret to me. I think it was pretty clear who he wanted, but I think he felt he couldn't have it.
Well, that could be. I don't know. He's kind of torn back and forth, I think, a little bit between Eliza and Charlotte until he has a minute to think about it.
I don't think he actually is torn, though. I think
he's already made up his mind.
I think he knows he wants Charlotte, but I think that he feels like he can't turn his back on his first love. I think he feels more of an obligation, more of a, like, even when Tom talks to him, of course you'd want her. She has money. You've loved her for 10 years. Of course you would want her. Why wouldn't you want her? I think there's that kind of speaking to his ear, like, well, she was the one I was going to marry. She is the one I've always wanted. She is the one I've pined for. So I should be with her.
But has he really pined for her up until he saw her again? We don't know that.
I would say, I don't think he has pined for her, but I think that he hasn't trusted he hasn't gone with any woman, period, since her, like nobody.
He probably pines for the ideal that
exactly
she represented when they were young. But and I think the whole reason he's with her at Sanditon is to try and get her to invest in what Tom's doing.
I think that's part of it. And I think I'm so glad that we get to see the deleted scene, because even though it couldn't make the cut for I assume timing purposes,
right,
it still is a really important scene that it still should be valid and still be taken into. And I know that some people are like, well, if it's a deleted scene, you shouldn't count it. But I don't think that's true. I think that it was part of the story. It's part of the script. It's part of demonstrating what's happening. And in that deleted scene that would have come from this episode, Sydney and Eliza are walking around town and he's saying, this is a great town, whatever. And she says, yeah, it looks like it's never changed. And he says something, of course, I'm paraphrasing. And he says something along the lines of, that he has changed. And she says, you're the same boy you were, which is so not true.
I'm the same girl I always was, and you're the same boy. And it's totally not true.
And I think that was really the point where he realized, I don't have to keep chasing this because I'm not the same as I was.
Yeah. Yeah, or maybe it's not till later that he allows himself to admit the choice he's made
Mm-hmm.
in his mind,
And plus, I mean,
and
that's in that society, in that time period, Eliza's the right choice. She's the one with the money. She's the one with the status. Charlotte is bringing what monetarily to the relationship? She's not bringing much.
not money wise, but
exactly
so
every other aspect, yes.
Right.
But financially, she's bringing nothing to it.
So I think it's really interesting. It's at this point they chose for Sydney to go take a dip in the sea. He comes out of the sea again. It's not the same bit of water that he was in, because there's more beach there. He went swimming really at the beach more than the coves. But he comes out again, and then you can tell he's deep in thought.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and I think it's about Charlotte and Eliza, because I think he knows who he wants, but I think his head they're two different things. I think he's made his choice with his heart, and he knows that's who he wants. He understands intellectually, this is who I want. But I think his head is saying, yeah, but you need this one. You want this one.
Yes.
But
and Eliza's still there, and he has to finish hosting her at the very least.
And Tom, who is in constant need of money, is really, really pushing for his younger brother, who he saves, to be with Eliza.
Yep.
And that's I like the fear. I think too, the other thing that we see on Sydney's face when he looks at Charlotte is Charlotte comes around that corner almost afraid. And the pain's got to be written on her face, because we kind of see it before she turns the corner. I think he recognizes that in her. So there's that. I think that's where that guilt comes from.
Yes, and not only did he go with that woman in London after they had that incredible dance, but here he's with her again.
And Mary says Sydney invited her to stay for the regatta. But I think it's interesting, she said he invited her to stay for the regatta. Not forever, not go back to London, just stay for the regatta. Come see what we have to offer. Is what he said to her. So,
well, that just indicates Mary's more sensitive than Tom, for instance. Yeah.
And Mary also knows that there's something brewing between Sydney and Charlotte at this point.
Yes. Yeah.
She's no dummy.
Yeah, that's right. So then we see Edward waking up from laying on that hard couch.
I love how Charlotte is looking. I mean, how
Eliza. Esther. Yeah, one of the other
Her real name is Charlotte, so that's gonna keep tripping me up. But Esther, I love the way she's just staring at him, sitting at the piano.
Yeah,
like not a foot away from him, just staring at him, willing him to wake up.
Right, and then he's like, "I would have slept in my bed," and she says, "Or maybe the floor."
Perhaps you would have preferred the floor.
Yeah,
and Edward is still taking it so lightly that he even says, "Where is the dead?" He says, "La donde es muerta," which is it's basically
he's waiting to hear that she's died.
Yeah, but I mean, he didn't even say, has she died? He said, "Where is the dead?" Like,
right.
Yikes, man. You're a horrible person.
Yeah. And Esther's like, not yet. And then he wakes basically to the news that from Dr. Fuchs and Clara, that she may have a full recovery. The Lady D is recovering, and she may have yet have a full recovery. And of course, Dr. Fuchs is ready to take credit for it.
Well, as he should. It probably is him that did it.
It'll be interesting to see what he does in this next,
because
the next
he's back.
Seasons. Yeah, he is back. I love this character. I love this actor. I mean, he's really good.
What I think is really interesting about this scene is the look on Clara's face the moment she walks in there. Really, really wide eyes. And there's a couple points where she's actually just shaking her head no behind Dr. Fuchs, as she's staring at Edward, willing him to look at her. And then when Edward hears, his whole body leans forward, and the exact same expression Clara has, stares at Clara for a minute and then looks back at Dr. Fuchs. Like he just knows instinctively, we're done. She's gonna know we're done.
Right. Yeah.
And could Lady Denham have been more masterful in that scene? I mean,
when they park. Do you want to skip ahead and go to that scene?
Yeah, well, since we're just kind of in line with that, let's just.
That's fine with me. So and it's.
Do you have it pulled up by chance? I see you reading. Do you have the script pulled up by chance?
I had it a minute ago and I guess I got rid of it. I made some notes, but I can pull it up pretty quickly.
Because that whole dialogue is just, not only is the dialogue great because the writing's good, but Annie Reid just killed that scene. She just killed it.
Yes. Yes,
From
she
her
did.
mannerisms to her facial expressions to even like there's a couple of points where she like kind of makes a sound with her mouth as she's talking, and it's like, yes, keep going.
Yeah. And it's interesting that it's Clara and Edward that come in, and Esther's still in the room, or she's already in. Oh, she
Nope.
followed them.
She followed them in there, and then she
That's right.
watched them both warily as she stood to the side, and then she just quietly clasped her hands in front of her body while she stood very distinctly away from them and almost in the shadow of the curtain.
Like she
Didn't want to be
just
seen
didn't
by
wanna-
anyone.
Yep, I agree. And let me find it.
And Clara says, "We have kept constant vigil."
Right.
Sure you did. And Edward's fake flattery of, "Oh, we're so glad you're better." I love when he's like, when he says Dr. Fuchs has earned our eternal gratitude. Why? I rallied despite him.
Yes, yeah. They say that they have his eternal gratitude, and if anyone deserves credit is the ass whose milk restored my strength. And then
I want to be friends with her.
She has this great speech. Well, you can dry your eyes. I found dying highly disagreeable and have no intention of repeating the experience. And there's no way I could use her. She is so great at it.
Mm-hmm.
Although it has to be said, there is nothing like imminent death to focus the mind. And it seems I have underestimated the boundless depths of your venality. They're like, oh, you must rest a while. Your fever.
Surely the fever has left you confused.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah. And she chuckles. No, I am anything but like a phoenix. I am rising from the ashes, which is more than I can say for my last will and testament.
Oh, I love how she says that in there.
Because like your miserable souls that is blackened beyond redemption. It was all Clara's idea, he says. He immediately turns and blames
instant finger pointing.
Edward is
not even trying to defend anything. And then Clara looks at him and goes, "Liar!"
Yeah. Oh, enough, you feeble parasites. Yeah, it's really, it's just a great speech. Mm-hmm. It'd be interesting to have a talk with her and find out if she thinks that's one of the best speeches she's ever been given. Yeah, and the whole time talking about, you're always talking about facial expressions. And the whole time you can see Esther, just the more she talks about what Esther knows she told her, the more she kind of tries to shrink into the dark.
Her eyes just keep getting wider and wider.
And she is backing up and trying to disappear.
And Clara and Edward's face is just getting more and more shocked and awed. Like it's almost like they can't even be angry at the fact that this woman who is comatose knows all this information about them, what they did that no one else should have known.
Right. And I'm sure they at least believe to begin with that each of them betrayed the other.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, Clara's not going to admit she told Esther.
Mm-mm. And honestly, I don't think Clara thinks that Esther's responsible either. I don't even think that's a blip in her mind. I don't think judging, maybe if you read the book, you might think that because of what she said. But having not read the book, I don't think Clara even thought her. I think she thought Edward through and through. I don't think they talk about that part. I don't remember. Well, when she said to Edward, don't tell Esther because she has a conscience.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't remember about this part though of the story, what it said.
Oh, okay.
What if Clara was, what they said Clara thought.
Yeah.
Or whatever, And so basically Lady D tells Edward he's disowned and Clara that she needs to pack for the next coach to London. So
never to blacken her door again.
Yeah.
And I love that as they're bowing, it's like when Edward goes to leave, he actually grabs Clara's hand.
Because Clara's keeps standing there. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But the fact that he thought of her enough to grab her hand and pull out her room is a little like, dude, you've already, that ship has sailed. Like, just leave her alone and walk away. But as he's backing out of the room, he's very, very snake-like watching Esther as he's backing out of the room. And he hears Lady Denham say, how does she word it?
It appears you're now my own sole remaining heir, more by luck than judgment.
That's what it is, more by luck than judgment.
Yeah.
So Edward obviously hears that, hey, you're the only one in the running for my money now.
Right.
But how Edward thinks it's going to be hers when he knows that her will says it's going to Sanditon.
Well, they burned the will.
Yes, but Lady Denham is aware they burned the will, so she's just going to create another one.
Yeah. And then it says, one of the lines she says too is, it seems the old floor has been indelibly stained. I shall be laying a new floor in my drawing room.
I love that. One last dig. It was Crystal Clark, I think, was doing an interview, and she said no one can deliver an insult like Lady Denham or like Annie.
Oh yeah.
And ain't that the truth?
It's really true. And that floor that she's talking about replacing is the one with a snake on it.
I didn't notice it had a snake on it.
You never noticed the snake design?
I don't think so. Do you see it when they're on the floor doing things?
Oh yeah.
I always fast forward that part. I don't watch that part.
Well,
it makes me uncomfortable.
You should check out the snake on the floor.
I will do that. I noticed that it's checked pattern and it's black and like a yellowy gold. Right? Or is that in my head too?
I don't think that's on that part of the floor, but there's a snake.
That's interesting.
It's a weird thing to have on your floor, but whatever. It's a big snake, like it's a Harry Potter size snake. So anyway, so then that's about all she says at that point to Esther.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's later, if you want to continue with Edward and Esther, it's later Esther is in that room, in the drawing room, and he comes in and is like, oh, how masterful you were. What exactly did she say? Do you remember? Let me see.
She says something about how how masterful you were, and he's like, you did it, and he said something along the lines of the money is ours, and she said, how? You're disowned and their money is by no means mine. And then she brings up Clara and talks about what he did with Clara, and he says, surely you wouldn't want to see me falling out with all the penny. And she said, even now, that's all you care about. And then it's, no, this is about us, this is about our future.
Yeah.
Is it though?
Yeah, he congratulates her on her inheritance, which she says, yeah, it's not guaranteed, And then the final remark is when she looks at him and sort of walks by him and says, it looks right up at him and says, and I loved you, and then walks away.
Yep. Loved.
Yeah. So the only other thing we see really with them in this episode is when he runs into Clara, and obviously he looks about half loaded, and she's has her bags and she's waiting to leave, and he gives her a hard time. He
says the defeated, do you call her enemy or foe, retreats? Defeated foe retreats. And she says, I was never your enemy. Which
and she says, basically I have nothing to lose. And
because he brings up the point. He brings up, what do you have? You have nothing but what's in those pathetic little bags. I have a title. And I like how he hits that word. He says title. Like he just hits that second T really hard just to drive the point home. And then she says, yes, but I had nothing to lose and you've lost everything.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think that's what fans of the show, when they want to get a good view of who the characters really are and what the intention behind them really is to see them when they've already lost and how they react. because Edward is lost and he is still trying to oust Clara. He's lost and he's still trying to get to her. Clara has lost and she says, listen, that's it. I'm done. I'm going to go back to where I came from, to where I've already survived once and I know I can again.
Right.
And that's how it's going to be for me. But we weren't enemies. We should have never been fighting. You brought it here and now you've lost everything and I feel bad for you. And she even says, I think she says, I'll try to spare you a thought as I know you'll think of me.
Right. Yeah, that's right. And it will be very, because after that, the scene that got cut is of her going to catch the coach and running into Crow.
And then she goes off with him, right? In that scene, does she actually get in the coach with him?
They don't show him getting in the coach, but he offers. He says, "Do you have someone to stay with?" And she says, "I have no friends worth knowing."
Mm-hmm.
And so he takes her bag.
Yeah,
you do now, he says.
Now, so, I don't know if Crow is going to be like a good guy, like a friend, or if he's going to be the guy who imbibes and carouses and goes to the brothels.
Hard for us to know. Mm-hmm. All we know is what he's talked.
And that's kind of why I hope he comes back. I want to see what happened there.
It will be interesting to see if they incorporate that scene, or at least what happened in that scene. Because obviously she's going to come back from London, I would assume.
Mm-hmm.
So it will be very interesting to see what happens with those guys.
And 9 months is a very, very particular time frame.
Yeah.
And that could go in 3 different directions.
We really have no idea.
Mm-mm. I mean, of course, we all have theories and what makes the most sense to us. But I mean, honestly, they have set the show up. And I think obviously Andrew Davies did that because he wanted to continue the series. So he set it up. So there's many different avenues it could take on the continuation.
Yep. That's what he wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
I do think they would have given, somehow reunited Sydney and Charlotte.
Yes.
Had this, all this other had not happened, but
if ITV had not canceled and they would have picked up filming right away, I think Theo James would have stuck it out.
Well, sure, because he still would have been under contract.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And if nothing, even if he wasn't, I think that he would have finished out his character. Mm-hmm. If it was right there to finish out.
Right. If they hadn't canceled then.
But I think he had such a bad, I don't want to say bad experience because obviously I'm not him and I'm not a part of the movie business, but with the Divergent franchise and how that ended so poorly, that's got to leave a bad taste in your mouth. So I think that he would have, but the other thing too is that he was producing this. His production company was producing it. And he was an executive producer on Sanditon. So he had more control over what would happen to his character. So I think that had they done it right away, then he would have vetoed things he didn't stand behind and gone with things he did. So it's a bummer.
Right. Yep. And
stupid ITV.
That's who I blame. But anyway, it is what it is. So now I'm going to go back to the Parkers who are going down to the beach, and for the
Sand,
they're on their way, and they start seeing people, and Tom is like, I hope we have more people, and she's like, well, some of them may already be at the river.
Actually, what he said is, I was expecting more people by now, which is that there's that fear coming in Tom.
Oh yeah, his doubts. And we also see Babington and Crow walking out of the Crown, and Babington keeps looking around, and Crow's like, surely you aren't looking for that Denham creature.
Heavens no, I'm giving up that hunt. It's a futile pursuit.
Yep. And the next thing we see is Sydney and Eliza walking to the sandcastle competition, and they stop to talk to Charlotte and pick up, what's the boy's name? Henry. Yeah, he picks up Henry. And of course, he assumes that Charlotte and Henry are the designers. And she says, no, that was the sister.
But the interesting part about the scene is he walks in there and he says, Miss Haywood. So he was just leading Eliza to, and this is the other reason why I think he already made a decision of what he wanted. He just was following what he thought he should do rather than what he wanted to do. because he took Eliza right to Charlotte. He didn't say, hi, Henry. Hi, Jenny. Hello, my nieces and nephews. He said, Miss Haywood. And then
he once again didn't introduce her.
Yep. Because he doesn't want them to know each other.
I would love to talk. That's one question I'd really like to ask. Andrew Davies wrote this scene. No, he didn't. No, he did not.
Wait, no, he wrote 8 and
Young wrote this one. He wrote 1, 2, and 8.
Yeah.
And Justin Young wrote this episode. I'd really like to ask him what was behind not introducing her.
Justin, if you are watching this podcast, I would really enjoy it if you would come on.
Yes. And hopefully
we have questions for you.
We do. Why is that? But
I mean, I think we can guess why he doesn't introduce them. But it'd be nice to hear his motivation. Yeah.
Yeah. But this is the part I've been wanting to point out for ages to somebody. So Sydney says to Eliza after he brushes off the sand, he says, let me take and show you Sydney's Tom's bathing machines. They're
new bathing machines.
The new bathing machines. And then they walk away from the beach, and the bathing machines are where they come from. They're in the background.
I noticed that. But I think those might be the old ones.
No, those are the new ones.
They look like they're the red ones with the things painted on them.
Those are the new ones.
I thought he got new ones for the regatta.
No.
That was what I always understood that to mean, was that he got new ones.
Those are the only bathing machines they had, and they were new because Lady D and Tom talked about them both earlier in the series. And just, it's ironic to me that he says he's taking her to see the bathing machines, and yet they're in the background as they walk away.
I think that's probably a continuity error.
Yeah.
I hope. But the other thing too about this scene is that when he says, I assume you and Henry are the architects, I think he just wants an excuse to talk to Charlotte. Under the guise of not talking to her. And then when they leave, he again doesn't say goodbye to Henry or Jenny. He says, good day, Miss Haywood. She's the only one he greets and the only one he says goodbye to. Right. And when Charlotte is on the ground, I thought she was looking at Sydney at first, but then if you watch her, she's watching Eliza. Like she's just staring at Eliza. And then when they cut back to, she kind of shifts her eyes over to the left a little bit. And that's when, she looks at Sydney, and they cut up to Sydney and Eliza. Eliza's staring at Charlotte. So they were just full on making eye contact.
Yep. And then they have the conversation as they walk away about, so now who is that? No.
She takes care of the children. Ooh, yikes.
Among other things, and oh, what a sweet thing. And I always think, he's got to be saying to himself, you have no idea.
And that's like when Southerners say, bless your heart. That's basically Southern for F you. And what she's saying here is, and I didn't know that. I thought bless your heart was like a kind thing. And I podcast with a bunch of Southerners who are like, no, that's not what that means. I didn't know that.
It depends on how it's delivered.
That's true. But when she says, such a sweet little thing, she hits the little. So first she says basically, oh, she's just a nanny. So she's not worth your time. She's way below your station. She has nothing to offer you. Well, that makes sense because she is a sweet little thing. So she's also too young for you, not up to your standards.
Yeah. She's definitely trying to find out how,
she has all the money she could possibly want. Why are you fighting for this guy who you don't know anymore? Like, it's almost like at that point when she saw she had competition, it just became, and she even says it later on in this episode, it's about winning him.
Oh yeah.
It's not even about Sydney Parker. It is about winning the prize she set out to win.
That's exactly what she wants. She wants him on her arm because he is the prize. Yeah. So then we see Arthur and Diana have just seen this arrival, and they go running down to Tom to tell him, when Tom's in the middle of handing out the awards for the sandcastles, that Lady Susan has arrived. Only it's Lady, what's her last name? Worcester.
Yes, that's what it is.
Worcester. Oh, Worcester. Lady Worcester.
Yes.
Worcester. I don't know how you say it.
It's Worcester. Don't they say Worcester? Worcester. It is Worcester. That's how Charlotte just said it. All right. So Lady Worcester comes. And did you notice that when Tom is handing out the ribbons, he hands it out to one and he kind of looks at it weird and then hands it to someone behind him. So it's like, this isn't mine, and he just gives it to someone else. Because Tom is so out of sorts, he just handed it to the first person he saw, and then he finally was like, okay, I clearly don't have the mental capacity for this. Someone else has got to take over.
Yep. Yeah, he hands the stack to them along with the list. And so I love when, like I said, when Arthur says, they're simpatico, Lady Worcester and the Prince Regent, and what it would do for the town if the Prince Regent could be there, could come.
And Arthur's so giddy about it. Like I think he's like almost like excited at the gossip of it, because Arthur is that kind of personality. The gossip and the excitement of someone new, it makes him giddy. And I like that about his personality.
And Diane's the same way. She's excited about this.
Oh, there's one more thing I want to say about Arthur and Diana before we go forward, is that when they're walking and they're talking about the boat race and Diana's trying to convince him not to do it, she's like, you get seasickness, and he says, it is the river.
I know.
And she says, no sweet airs.
I know. It's pretty funny.
Just their relationship is so overbearing, helicopter mom and son.
Yeah.
And brother and sister, like a year apart.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
All right, so when they come up and meet Lady Worcester, Tom is still flustered, and he's like, this is my wife, and he has to look around because he's not really sure where Mary is behind him, because he is sped walked so fast in front of all of them. Right. Yeah. And I like that Charlotte didn't recognize her at first either,
or at least didn't approach like she did.
Well, when she says Susan, like, she looks completely surprised that that's who it is.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, because I think she had in her mind it was somebody she didn't know.
Yeah.
And obviously she looks different than she did at the ball, and the lighting's different and everything else.
Yeah.
So, and when she gets close, she realizes, And
when she says Charlotte, to continue my conversation with Charlotte.
Right. Which is wonderful. And then shortly after that, we see Lady Susan and Charlotte walking together. And I love the way, they have this conversation, and she's like, does a certain person know that you are in love with him? I am not, she responds. And she says, I'm never wrong about this. I'm never wrong about love. And she says, well, even if it's true, he's spoken for. Oh, yes. And she's quite elegant, probably the most elegant widow in the county.
In all of London, I think she says.
Yeah, whatever. And then she says, but we will find the chink in her armor.
I love how she says that. She will have a chink in her armor. Like, she's just so sing-songy about it. And immediately follows it up with Mrs. Campion.
Then turns around. She's always doing this to Charlotte. She's somewhat putting Charlotte on the spot, as it were. So
James rescues her.
Yes, she quickly walks off, and conveniently James Stringer walks up. So they walk off to check on the starting area to make sure it's all set up.
And I think James has kind of been stalking the river, waiting for her to come down there, because he didn't want to miss their conversation.
I'm sure you're right. Yeah, absolutely.
The first time I watched this through, all the way up until the end of this episode, my friend and I were watching together, and I would text her and I kept saying, she's falling in love with the wrong guy. She's supposed to be with James Stringer. The first time through, I was so irritated that she was ignoring James Stringer and going for Sydney Parker, because of how sweet he is and how kind he is. And this conversation is just a prime example of how sweet he is. He's not passionate enough for her, and he wouldn't be right for her. But at the time, all I could think is she's got the wrong guy.
Yeah. Well, And then
he can't be direct.
What's that?
He can't be direct, as it shows here.
Yeah. And he's in a, they weren't very direct in those days, and he's in a different class, social class. So that's a lot of the reason, I think. And then she says, he says, it looks like the regatta will be successful, and it's largely because of you. And she says, well, I've been grateful for the distraction. And like, distraction from what?
He gets excited.
My own thoughts. And she is, she totally doesn't understand where he's coming from at all.
She's so naive about this stuff.
He's not clued into that for a minute. And of course, where was it before that he says, I may be more like a better listener. What exactly does she say? I mean,
I don't remember his exact wording, but he's basically saying, if you tell me what your trouble is, I might be a better listener. And then she said that that's, again, I'm paraphrasing, but she says basically that she has just realized that the person she has feelings for can't possibly feel the same about her. And he says, well, how do you know that his feelings aren't 10 times over what yours are? Why are you assuming she's talking about you? Yeah. Why does your mind immediately go there? And I guess it's because she did accidentally lead him on, but only because she was friendly. And he took that as a woman of her class would not be friendly with me unless she cared about me. And she does care about him, just not in the way that he wants her to.
Right.
And that's the thing, is that she does care about him, and he misread that care as love and affection in a romantic way.
Right. Anyway, he comes to realize that she is not interested. He's not the one she's interested in. We're sort of distracted by.
Yeah. And
then we see the three brothers walking together. And this is when Tom goes on and on about how you're going to marry Eliza, that Sydney will marry Eliza. And he says, well, let's not be in too big a hurry. And of course, Tom's all ready for it. I mean, he's decided it's the best thing. And although I doubt she will remain Mrs. Campion for long if you have your way, steady on, Tom. There's no need to rush things. And that's when he says, why not? She's beautiful, witty, and rich, and you have loved her for a decade.
And Arthur here is the wise one.
He is definitely wise. And he says, do you know, for years, all I knew about my brother Sidney was that he was driven to the West Indies with a broken heart. And what's your point, Arthur? Yeah. I admire your spirit of forgiveness. That is all. If it were me, I do not think I could bring myself to trust her again. Boy, is he right.
Arthur is way more wise than he's given credit for.
Absolutely.
And I think that can be seen even how he handles Georgiana, which he already went back and got Georgiana a little bit earlier than this. We kind of skipped over that part a little, but that's okay. But I think that when he went back to go get Georgiana, because it's right before, she's there for the regatta, she's there for all the stuff when they're walking around, or even if it's after this, it doesn't really matter. But in this episode, he goes back to get Georgiana, and she's being read to by that horrible reverend in the most boring way possible. And, well, it is Reverend Hankins is his name in the show,
right?
But just she has to be so unimaginably bored, because she, after that sermon about the lilies of the field, and everyone's just disgusted with how he thinks of things, and he's the one she's stuck with. And it's almost, she's sitting there almost too docilely, like she just accepts, this is my punishment, I deserve this.
And then he asks about continuing, and she's like, I'd rather be crucified.
I do not doubt that your pain is severe, but it cannot be compared to
that on the cross.
Yeah, but he says to something, to the agonies of the cross.
Right, that's it. Yeah.
But when Arthur comes in and he lies to get her down there, and he lies to get her out of the house, and they're out of there, and Georgiana says, well, first of all, I love how Arthur does it. He's like, the duck race. No one, the Reverend is like, oh, okay then, sure. He's very obviously lying to you, dude. But when they go outside and they're walking, and the first thing Georgiana says is something along the lines of, okay, you can go now. I was like, no way.
I no longer require your company.
He got her out because Arthur is very wise when it comes to the feelings of others around him. He's very empathetic.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he definitely is.
He really has a heart to see people who are broken and hurting, to see them feeling better and not see them filled with pain. That's his desire in a lot of people. And what an incredible gift to have in that time period.
Yeah, no, he's great. I really gotta love Arthur, If
I was having Sanditon 2 without him and Babington, I'd be really upset.
Yeah. I wonder, do we still don't know about Diane, do we?
She has not said one or the other, but I from what I've seen of her Instagram, she hasn't been filming. She's been in France. I mean, of course, they could be banked pictures, but I doubt it because she just had her baby. So
yeah.
But then when they get down to the regatta, and that's when Georgiana is saying all these things about how everyone's looking at me, they know what I am, they know what I did. He's like, everyone's always looked at you.
Yeah.
I didn't think you would care. I didn't think you would mind. This is normal. And then her response is, I think you might be the most infuriating man I've ever met. I'll take that as a compliment. And chases her down.
She's great.
Next to Babington, he's the best man in that show.
Yeah, well, besides Sydney.
No, I think that Arthur is the most altruistic person in that show, other than Babington.
Oh, altruistic, yeah. No, I agree.
I think he's the best man.
But obviously he is, and he is great. I agree. And other than his little hypochondriac tendency,
which I think is more fed when the very first episode, it switches because it's more Diana is more free and Arthur is more panicked. But every episode after that, Arthur is more free and Diana is the one convincing him he has all these things.
Right.
He actually doesn't, like, even when they're dancing in episode 8, he doesn't want to stop. It's Diana who says, no, you're going to get sick. We have to go now.
Yeah, no doubt. Yep. A lot of it's her fear.
Mm-hmm. And he listens because that's his pal. That's who he is going to live out his life with, is her. And it makes him happy to make other people happy. Yep,
that's right. And we missed the part about Tom and Mary walking down to the river, and he's so excited to see the entire Beaumont here. And Mary's like, I'm happy for you, Do
you think she seems kind of sad when she says that?
Yeah.
I wonder why.
I'm not quite sure, other than she is, I think it's because she's resigned about finally understanding the cause for his concerns. And
maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
And what it cost him really to do this.
Right. And then we see Sydney show up where Charlotte is at the start of the rowing competition ahead of time, an hour before she says that it will be in an hour. And then he, after another discussion, back and forth about, do I look like I'm ready for this? And he says, I don't know. And she says, I don't know. And he says, well, sadly, I don't either, regrettably, that he hasn't rowed in a long time. And then he gets in the boat but she says, maybe once you start doing it, it'll all come back to you. And he stops and he stares at her and he says, I wonder. And clearly they're talking about his relationship with Eliza. At least that's what he's talking about. That's not what she's talking about. I think she actually thinks they're talking about rowing. But Sydney's clearly talking about his relationship with Eliza. Right. And then he says, as he's putting the oars in the boat and she helps, a man cannot step in the same river twice. Have you ever heard that? And she says, for he is not the same man and it is not the same river. It's Heraclitus. And she's like, yes, of course you'd know that. And that comment to me is what really makes you understand how much he has come to respect her and understand her. and who she really is and how much she has to offer.
Yeah. And I think that it also shows that is absolutely true. And I think that's why it shows it. But I think that his comment like that, I don't think he was trying to impress her exactly, but I think that he wanted to show her that he is equally smart, that he also knows more than just your surface kind of thing that men are supposed to know back then.
Right. And that he respects her enough to even discuss it. You know, philosophy, I'm sure, was not something that most men discussed with women.
Women weren't they weren't even supposed to have knowledge of anything educational.
Right. Yeah. And I'm sure you know the story about how Theo James had to correct the name they were using in the script because they had quoted some other philosopher, and he said, no, it's Heraclitus.
Oh, I didn't know that. Doesn't surprise me, but I didn't know that. No.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So he convinces her to get in the boat with him, and then it's
right. I need a second person to balance the boat. Would you mind?
Sure you do.
Come on. And they sit down and start rowing. And then he says, may I ask you something, Miss Haywood? Why is it when I finally have a chance at happiness, I cannot accept the fact? Now, what exactly does he mean? Is he talking about Eliza or her?
I think that he's saying, I finally have a chance to have what I wanted all those years ago with Eliza, but I no longer want it. Why can't I just accept that this is what I did want? Why do I have to keep looking back to you? Why do I have to keep fighting for you when she's what I'm supposed to want?
Except for he goes on to say, I convinced myself that I was destined to remain alone.
And then Eliza came back in and Charlotte came back in at the same time. So it's still, he convinced himself he was able to be alone. But then the moment he realized he wanted Charlotte was the exact same moment that who he was supposed to want came back in. So now it's just a battle of, I've always thought I was going to be alone. And now I have these two options, one I want and one I should want. Why can't I just accept the fact that this is who I'm supposed to be with and just deal with it?
And then I love when she says, I don't think that anybody is truly unsuited for marriage, not even you. And he chuckles. And she says, I suppose it's just a question of compatibility. Yeah. So interesting.
Yeah. And that's him. That was her unintentionally revealing to him that she was the choice that he needed to go with, even though he should want the other one.
Yeah. Yeah. And I understand that when he they get started and he asks for her hands and then he touches her back and says, keep your back straight, that wasn't part of the script, that's something Theo James just came up with.
I didn't know that either, but that makes sense too. Because he would look at that time to show how you felt about someone, especially in a conversation like that, you would look for ways that were innocent, but still physical.
Right.
And even when he pulls her into the boat, when she falls into the boat, he holds her hand a beat too long and then puts his hand over top of hers and then he lets her go.
Right. Yeah.
So there's a lot that was almost how you showed your preference for a person was by that. I mean, how often did he touch Eliza?
Yeah.
Pretty sure we don't see him once touch Eliza.
Yeah, I don't.
We don't, do we?
No, I don't. I think you're right. I don't think.
Not even when they're walking. She doesn't even have her arm through his when they're walking.
Yeah. No.
So that was smart. And that's one thing that's why I think that's why I don't think anyone else could be Sidney Parker other than Theo James, because he instinctively knew how to show what Sidney Parker was thinking and the preference he had by those seemingly innocuous things, by not touching, I mean, it's his own wife, not touching her in any sort of way, but reaching out to touch the other woman in several different innocent ways. Yeah.
Yeah.
My sweet spot, my nonverbal sweet spot.
Right.
And so obviously Eliza is incredibly jealous and becomes spiteful and is realizing that she is about to lose this prize that she was about to tote around London. And that's all it would have been is, look at who I won. Look at who was pining for me all these years. And I really think that's all, even though he wasn't, Eliza would have marketed it as that.
Right. And she comes up on them rowing. And we as viewers are like, oh shoot. Why did she have to interrupt them, right?
Yes. Go away. Go back to where you came from.
Yeah.
And all she does is just say Sydney and breaks their beautiful moment.
Right. It would make, I was amazed that he stood up and turned around right then,
I wouldn't have done that.
I know. It's yeah. Anyway.
So we're gonna jump then to the scene of when Lady Susan is walking around with Charlotte. Right. And introducing her to all these people. And Charlotte is thanking her profusely for, you made this happen. You brought all these people here. And it's basically a vehicle to get Charlotte to where she needs to be on the tent so Eliza and Sydney can come up upon them. And obviously, Eliza made a beeline for Charlotte and Susan. It wasn't about Susan. It was about trying to diffuse the Sydney Charlotte thing. And she just used the same tactics she did before of insulting her, of trying to undermine her and prove that she is so far beneath this notice in front of him. And that's all it was.
Yeah. Belittle her, Yeah. I do like before that when Charlotte is thanking Susan for, did you bring all these people here? And she talks about how social circles are like the cog of a clock. And then right before Eliza gets to them, Susan says to Charlotte, I think we found her Achilles heel.
What?
Really? What is it? You, yeah. And then of course they weren't discussing marriage. And yet when Eliza asked what the subject of discussion was, Lady Susan says marriage.
Charlotte's face when she said that was like, what are you doing?
Yeah, what are you? Yeah, what? Yeah, that was really funny.
And when Sydney answered, he looked to Charlotte first and then to Eliza and then on the ground and then said, I wouldn't know. I'm not really authority on this.
Right.
And Eliza just turned right away to Charlotte. Could have turned to Susan, but she didn't.
Yeah.
And the way, the things she said to her, just about how there must be, and the way Sydney looked at her, she said, there must be some boy from your village. Yeah. Sydney I think he was irritated because one, she's speaking rudely to Charlotte. And even if he wasn't romantically involved in Charlotte, it means something to him. So there's that, but there's also, I think, a little bit of, there better not be another guy for her.
I hadn't thought about that, but I love what Lady Susan says. She comes back and says, why should she be, kept, why should Charlotte be limited to her village? And then she talks about, it helps to have a common background. And
then goes on to say that she wouldn't have anything in common with anyone there because she would find their talk just boring.
Right. Hardly find a kindred spirit in this company. Well, little does she know she already has found a kindred spirit.
And Charlotte's response to the marriage question when Eliza asked her was, there hardly seems any point of thinking about marriage until you found someone you wish to marry.
Exactly.
And Eliza still digs it in.
Right.
And then, of course, Sydney inadvertently makes a joke at her expense.
I don't think he was trying to make a joke. He was honoring the fact that
he was.
He was very respectful of her, but that because of Eliza's reaction, that's not how it came out.
Exactly. And her friends, he had inadvertently made a joke about her.
Right.
And he didn't correct Eliza when she openly mocked her.
Right in front of her. And then Charlotte handles it well, though. She says, you're quite right, Mrs. Campion. I'm a farmer's daughter who reads books. What could I possibly have in common with anyone here?
Yeah.
She's offended and has a right to be.
Absolutely. And then when she walks away, we see James going to go get a book, incidentally, behind her. But he's kind of torn with indecision of whether or not to go to her. And then I love, again, this is a really great way that they scripted and directed their positions of the whole time Sydney and Charlotte are having their interaction, James Stringer's in the background watching it. And he gets like, at first he's got his hand on his hip, like he's almost ready to go out there. And then by the end, he's sitting down on the thing, just staring at them and watching them. So it's a really nice view that you can see him in the background completely eyeing up this exchange and everything that's happening.
Yeah, that's right. And, you know, and of course, here comes Sydney right away, which I can't quite imagine. I guess he gave the excuse that he had to go get ready for the race. And that's what she says is the race is about to start and takes off. Yeah. And he's wait, you know. Yeah.
Chases her down and grabs her again.
Yep.
Grabs her by the bare hand.
And he says, I hope you were not too offended by Mrs. Campion. And I was only meant in jest. And she says, is that all I am to you? A source of amusement? You know, and no, of course not. Forgive me. And he just can't say the words.
He says, of course not. And then he stops.
Right. He was
going to say, you're more than that.
Right.
And I don't know if it's the fear of recognizing how madly he wants her when he's got Eliza, or how he realizes that he's falling in love with her, but he should be with Eliza. So he's sort of kind of sticking with her because he should be with her. I don't know if it's that fear or if it's that I can't actually give myself to someone I care about, because then it's really going to suck when they drop me.
Or it may be that he's just not prepared to reveal his true feelings in the middle of this public place.
I mean, he's sort of been forcing her into that all day, though.
Yeah.
Starting from the very beginning of the episode, he's been kind of forcing her into, hey, this is how I feel about you. I mean, men don't have those kind of conversations with women back then. The kind he had with her on that boat, men didn't have those conversations that were that intimate with women that they weren't seeking.
Right, but that was more private than where he is in this scene.
Yeah, but even walking down the street in the beginning of the episode, when they were talking about how he's not as jaded as he thinks he is, and Charlotte even says, for certain, you know more than anyone else how much it hurts to be spurned by someone you love. And they're having a very intimate conversation about his past. And yeah, it's not that intimate, but he also openly ran after her and chased her down and wouldn't let her leave in front of all those people.
Yep.
That alone declared what he felt.
Right.
And but I mean, mental and instinct and verbalizing are two different things. And I get that.
Right. Yeah. And then she's like, just be kind enough to leave me alone, and takes.
Well, first she says, I like that how she words it when she says, he says, forgive me. And she says, on the contrary, you've shown me exactly how much I mean to you, or exactly where I stand. How does she word exactly where I stand?
She says, I'm no longer in any doubt on how you regard me.
How you regard me. And then his response is what?
And then he says, Miss Haywood.
Oh yeah, and she was going to walk away.
She says, what is it you want from me?
And he can't get it out.
Then please be kind enough to leave me alone. He just his mouth isn't working.
No, and he just looks so devastated when she walks away, and he hates himself a little bit more after that interaction.
Right.
There's one thing Sydney Parker does not need. It's more hate for himself.
No, that's right. And then they switch to the scene where Edward shows up to drink some of the free alcohol that's there. And then she tells Tom that Lady D has risen Lazarus-like from her deathbed. And he's excited. That's wonderful news. You know, the opposite of what
Tom's day is going swimmingly.
Edward is thinking. And she's like, yes, I'm quite beside myself.
And then he goes and seeks out Babington to tell him his sister is lying about him. And I don't know if his purpose here is he thinks that any word he says will be held as gospel because he's Lord Edward Denham. But so I'm wondering if he thinks that his viewpoint here, his goal here is to say something bad enough about her that Babington will reject her and she'll have no course but to get that inheritance money and then come back to Edward. Or if his goal is actually, you know what, here, because he says at the end, you're welcome to her.
I know.
So it's hard to understand. I think it has to be that he's trying to get Babington to reject her so that money can be his and Esther's again.
Well, he says, you should know my sister is utterly deluded. She's been making the most preposterous slurs against my name. Edward's only ever focused on Edward. I don't think he can put aside that. And all in some cynical bid to steal my share of the inheritance. It breaks my heart to say it, but she's dead to me. I mean, he's just reeling and obviously has been drinking.
Yeah. But I do think he's always scheming, though. And I think that part of this is in an effort to get Babington to, because if he's going to say, here, go take her, he's not going to say she's deluded. He's not going to say she's utterly deluded.
No, you're right. I mean, he's putting, I think he's being preemptive. He's trying to put her in a bad light before he is put in a bad light.
Yeah. And I also think that he thinks, and that's seen later on in episode 8, and that's kind of where I'm pulling this from because I'm digging into the next episode. But I think that part of his goal here is that if he can get to the place, if he can get Babington to a place where he will willingly reject Esther, then Esther is going to need that inheritance money because Babington will have rejected her. It won't be Esther's fault. So Lady Denham will just have to give her the inheritance money, and then Edward can weasel his way back in.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure that this character has that much forethought.
I think when it comes to himself and preserving that money, I think he does. When it comes to anyone else, absolutely not. But him and that money, yeah.
It is going to be really interesting to see where they take the story.
I know.
Episodes. This one of all of them, you know. And then I love how Babington's like, what did he mean, Crow? Utterly deluded. That's not the Esther Denham I know.
Poor Crow's like, dude, stop. I don't care.
He doesn't.
Let's just drink
I've
and
got 5 pounds on this race for us to win. So put your mind on that.
All I want to do, Babington, is drink and row a boat.
And I love the next scene. We see Tom in his true light as the showman, you know, calling everybody to see the men's race. It's about to begin.
And you see that at the beginning of every ball too, and I love it.
Yeah.
And then Stringer says to Fred, I'll be damned if I'm going to lose to him twice in a day.
Yeah, that's right.
He says, ask him, and I love that he says that. I love that he points it out because Stringer's obviously figured it out because he's not an idiot. He's figured out what's happening. But he also sees how Sydney is who this amazing girl wants. And this is what Sydney's doing with that gift, with that prize. And I think that he doesn't think that that Sydney is man enough because he's rejecting Charlotte. Like, how stupid can you be to reject this girl? And I think that's kind of what he's thinking is, there's no way I'm going to lose to someone like that who has no idea the value of what he has.
Yeah. Well, and then one of my favorite scenes at this point is when the 3 brothers are standing in the tent and they're discussing strategy, and the whole time Sydney keeps looking over at Charlotte and not really paying much attention to what they're saying. He repeatedly looks around Tom to look at Charlotte. And, you know, so you know where his head is. And he says, and Tom says, what's our strategy? Or I trust we're feeling confident. That's not the word I would choose. And then especially
Arthur says that's not what I would choose after seeing the competition.
Right. And then he says, after I've seen the composition. And he says, Tom says, I wonder if we should have a strategy.
I love Arthur's response.
Yeah, my strategy principally revolves around not drowning.
I want to be friends with Arthur so bad.
And then Tom says, Sydney, what do you think? How the hell should I know? He could care less about this at this point.
I don't even think it's so much that he cares less about the rowing. I think it's that he's so filled with hatred of himself that he can't make the right decision, that it's generally, how should I know anything? Why are you coming to me for any advice at all? What do I have to offer any of you? Look at how I'm screwing this up.
And he's just so preoccupied with her and what happened with Charlotte and what happened. And then they wish him good luck and the race takes off. But
Mary obviously wishes the Parkers good luck, and Charlotte obviously only says, good luck, Mr. Stringer. Yeah, no one else. And right. James at that point is like, I think the look on his face just kind of says, don't use me to kind of attack him. Because he
no matter how sweet you are to me, I don't have any hope.
I think it is partly that, but I think the way he looks from her to Sydney and then to Fred is just kind of like, because he's like, thank you, miss. Let's go. I think a lot of it is just kind of like, because she very obviously didn't wish the Parkers any luck at all and only wished James Stringer luck loud and clear.
Yeah, that's right.
And I don't think that was Charlotte's plan, because I don't think Charlotte thinks that way. But I think that she was also really hurt by Sydney and really wanted to tell someone she cared about. And I think that she did. There was probably some level of letting Sydney know, hey, you didn't affect me.
Right. Well, and also I think it's also, haven't you ever heard somebody being told good luck and so you told somebody else good luck so they weren't left out?
I think it could be that, but then why didn't she wish Fred or Babington or Crow?
Yeah, hard to say, but you're right.
So the only people who were bid good luck were the Parkers and James. That was it.
She saw James as a friend.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway.
But I think she also kind of sees, Babington and Crow, Babington and her talked and hung out at that dance the episode before. And, she's talked with Fred a little bit. So, I think it's more has to do with the dynamic between the trio.
Two men. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And her.
And I love when they're rowing. And I do want to talk about when the girls run off, but I love when they start rowing and you see Crow with his little flask and he holds it so weird. And I love how he holds it. I don't know why, but he's like, has his fingers very rigid and it's almost like an L shape between his knuckles and his fingers. And he just holds it all the way back. He doesn't bend any part of his arm, but he just tilts his head to drink it. It's so funny. I don't know why it makes me laugh.
Yeah, he's funny in every way. What a great character.
Even the way he shouts out the commands. All right, men, doing well, looking very well. Just cracks me up. I love this character.
And Babington's like, watch where you're going. And he says, bugger that. Easy, Crow, easy.
He said they're coming up on they're gaining on us. And
yeah,
then
they're
like, bugger that.
That's right.
They're not going to gain on us.
And then he says, trust me, I am in complete control. He's not in control of anything. Except for he is gonna, stop them from coming up on him. That's for sure.
Maybe that's the brilliance of Crow, is that he's sort of this lovable jokester. Maybe it was just water in his flask and he's just trying to help Sydney and James Stringer fight it out. Maybe he's picked up on something nobody else did.
Not at all. He has 5 pounds on the race.
Yeah, right. He's probably drunk.
So then we see the women, at the riverside on the watching the race, and they
Eliza.
When Eliza says, I do hope Sydney wins. I've never seen the point of entering a race unless you win it.
Every time she speaks after that sandcastle competition, I just want to slap her in the face.
Yeah.
She's just so terrible.
You have to love Diane's attitude, because she's like, is that not my brother's boat in the lead?
She's so surprised. She keeps going, go on the Parkers, go on the Parkers.
Yeah. And then after she didn't want him to be in the race, but now that he is, I guess she's accepted it.
Yeah. It was exciting. Even Georgiana, when the race started, she was peering around to see it. And old Stringer got up on his one crutch and was cheering on the boat race. When I was talking to Rob Jarvis, he was talking about how much he liked to film that scene because it was like really fun for him to see his son win the race. And he was digging into what that felt like. And that was a really fun thing to talk to him about.
I remember that. Yeah. And of course, Stringer and his team win.
And Eliza tries to be refined and she just lets it one time, go on, Sydney. And then he loses. And her response, like as soon as she realizes he loses, she kind of looks over at Charlotte. Like, yeah, And of course, when James walks up there and he just humbly accepts it. And then he goes to Sydney and Sydney says, congratulations. And he says, not the prize I was after.
Yeah.
And there was a thread I saw on Twitter where they were asking about that. And they were actually saying, do you think he just views Charlotte as a prize and that it was just, she was bound to be with one or the other of them? And I don't think that's true. I think James actually had feelings for her. I think he was more infatuated rather than in love with her, though. I don't think he actually loved her. I think he was just infatuated with this girl who was an anomaly, who liked what he liked, listened when he spoke, was above his station, was very kind, was very beautiful. was good with kids, was friendly to everyone around her. I think he was just enthralled with who Charlotte is.
And very caring. I mean, helping with his father,
Yeah.
and very capable, as Sydney
Mhm.
put it. And he, she really treated him very well.
Yeah.
Which, for a person of her station, that probably didn't happen that often.
Mhm.
The difference in their stations,
Yeah. And it's not like a love match was super common then. You
No.
hoped for a good match. You hoped for a match that would make you happy instead of miserable. And whether or not it was a love match, their marriage would have at least had good friendship,
Right.
if nothing else. And I think that James really saw that as an opportunity for him. And I think James would see being a husband and a father as elevating him too. I think he would see that as an achievement, as something that's good that he could do. And so I don't think that he saw her as simply an object like someone had suggested. And I don't think that he thought it's inevitable she's going to be with one of us. I think he felt she is a prize worth earning. Not that she's an object worth earning, but she is something to be treasured in any way. And she is worth earning your love and respect. And that's what I was hoping to win, was her love and her respect.
Right.
Because I think, like Charlotte, there's not a bad bone on James's body.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah.
What were you going to say?
So, I'm agreeing with you, and I think that it had to be unusual. I mean, who knows what his experience with women were at all, but for her to treat him repeatedly with so much respect, that had to be, uplifting to him. So of course he would like her.
Yeah.
And obviously he saw her value, which is good.
Yeah. And she saw his value, but she saw it as, a friend would see a friend's value.
And, like being an architect and, the things that he could do with his life, not for me.
Yeah. She encouraged him, and she wanted him to be more. She wanted him to achieve his dreams. And I think she was probably the first person ever to tell him that. I mean, Tom would say that to him, but Tom would also go back on it.
Right. And also probably the first woman to ever.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Because his mom had died and he didn't really have any other women that he would talk to. It's not like he just hung out with female friends who were a guy. It didn't happen really.
Right. Yeah. And then we see the Parkers walking Lady Susan to her carriage. Or coach, I guess it was more of a coach. And of course, Tom says, she says, Mr. Parker, must thank you for a most invigorating day. And he's like, well, it's I who should thank you. And if I might presume, I hope that we might see you in Sanditon again, perhaps for a longer time. And she says, that's a distinct likelihood. I have one particular friend who would be rather taken with the place. And of course, they're immediately hopping to the Prince Regent. It'll be interesting to see if they bring the Prince Regent.
Oh, I think they will.
To Sanditon, and who plays that role.
Because that's obviously who she's talking about. I mean, she said it that way for that reason.
Yeah.
And I think that I love how they interact, and Tom is so like almost like a giddy schoolgirl with her. And she's very accommodating to his excitement.
He's obviously used to having people fawn over her. And but I love her conversation with Charlotte.
Yeah.
And of course, that's a lot of why the fandom really thought there was a good chance for Sidlot, among other situations. But
I mean, all the writers were setting it up.
Yep. She says, goodbye, Charlotte. You must not lose heart. The race is not yet run. Thank you. I am more or less resigned to the outcome. Ah, my dear, when it comes to love, there's no such thing as a foregone conclusion.
And then they gave us that ending.
Yeah.
And then ITV just took it all away.
Yep. Yeah.
So she gets in there. I even like the conversation that Tom and Mary have after that. And I think it's adorable because the strap keep falling off. That was not scripted, that it just kept falling off. And so Mary would lean over, and when I interviewed Kate Ashfield, she had talked about that a little bit, about how It was just, she felt like that was something a caring, like Mary would do for her husband, that she would notice it and just help him out without thinking about it. And so she was saying that she's kept doing that. But how Tom, his return to levity again, like with the sword fight with his son, this is who Tom really is, free of stress and free of disappointing everybody on large scales. And he says to his wife, I'll tell you everything. Like right now, my entire body is in spasm.
Right. And even before that, he says, she says, your regatta was a huge triumph. Yeah. And she says, come Mary, we can hardly call it my regatta. It was our regatta, it was great that he made that shift in the way he talked. It wouldn't have happened without Charlotte, and it couldn't have happened without you.
Well, it should have been, I get what he's trying to do there, but it should have been the other way. It wouldn't have happened without Mary. It couldn't have happened without Charlotte. Because it was Charlotte's idea. Charlotte brought Lady Susan and Charlotte planned all the activities. But I get what he's trying to do there.
Yeah. Well, anyway, he's sharing the credit.
Yes. As I think he used to, because it feels like a return to their normal is what this feels like.
Yeah.
And then of course we see Eliza and we don't need to say the exact dialogue, but we see Eliza and Sydney down at the river, and he basically says, you didn't have to wait for rain. She says, I did for 10 years. What's an hour more? And obviously
15 minutes. Yeah.
Obviously he's telling her, listen, you're not the one. I'm not choosing you. I'm not going back with you. This is not what this was. This is not what this is. And then he leaves. And we presume she leaves. And then he goes back. I think there's a scene or two in there, but the biggest consequential thing that happens in this episode next is going back to Sanditon, or going back to Trafalgar House at night. And he comes in the door. And wait, were you going to say a different scene in there?
Yeah, we're going to miss the scene between Babington and Esther.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. Well, it's because I talked about it last week. It hasn't come out yet because I've been at camp all weekend. But that will have been, you guys will have seen that episode last week. That was the Esther Babington episode. But yes,
okay.
We can talk about that, where he goes up there and he says, now his dialogue is pretty fantastic. And first of all, he refuses to be turned away. He wouldn't allow himself to be turned away. But once he gets into Esther's presence, then he requests. He turns around the guy and says, just a moment, please. Yeah. So he's refusing until he actually sees her. And once he lays eyes on her, then he asks if it's okay if he can stay. And he says, I don't pretend to understand what transpired. And she screams, you know nothing. And he says, what I do know is that your brother has kept you his prisoner and has kept you within his grasp and abused you for who knows how long. I'm only glad that you're no longer under his influence. And then she starts to break down.
Right.
And she cries and she weeps, and he knows that he's hit it on his head. But he does start off by saying, all the way he feels about her. If you want to read the exact thing, you can. I can see you following along with the script.
Well, he said, what he says, I feel like I could spend 1,000 years in your company and still not fathom you out. And and then you said it. Your brother spoke to me in such derogatory terms about you, and he's kept you as a prisoner, and he's abused the power that he's had in ways I can't even guess, which is basically what you paraphrased.
And then she breaks that emotion this scene right here, for me, is the hardest hitting scene in the entire series.
Yeah.
And I don't think, even with Sydney and Charlotte, I don't think another character has read another character as well as Babington has read Esther, and has had served her. Because even she's rejected him. They're done. She's told him no. She's moved on, and still, the moment he hears she's in trouble, he runs to her to protect and save her, knowing, okay, you don't want me. You've told me no, but I'm still going to protect you. I'm still going to fight for you. And even with Sydney, he says, I know you love me. I love you. I want to be with you, but I'm going to go be with her. So while we understand why Sydney goes with Eliza, Babington, even though rejected, even though told no, even though he does not view there as a chance, because in the scene he says, I come here with no expectations, only as a friend. That's what he's coming back there. He's in love with this woman. He's saying, I'm willing to just be your friend if it means I can help you through this. he understands her so well. And he says, we will not let your brother turn you into a victim. I won't let it happen.
Right.
And then he gives her his handkerchief. And the look she gives him is almost astonishment that he would provide her a handkerchief, something as little as a handkerchief. It's so sad that the life she's lived has made it so that she's surprised that someone would do that for her.
And the acting by those two.
Yes.
Is amazing. Just amazing. I'm glad that Charlotte Spencer is coming back as Esther. I'm really sad to miss out, but I understand he's in that other role. I mean, it's pretty hard.
They didn't say anything about season 3. They just said the next season.
Yeah.
So he could still make an appearance or 2 in season 3. He might still pop up once. I don't think he'll have any solid role. I don't think he'll have a long-term thing. I think that if we see anything of Babington, which Mark Stanley, please, just a glimpse, just like a 5-minute shot of you in there. Just
cameo.
I think it's possible that we'll get that. I don't think it'll be unheard of, but I certainly don't think there's going to be a solid spot for him in there because I don't think he can.
Okay, now we can get to the final scene.
And this is where you hear the I'm looking at Mark's name and it came out weird. You hear the knock on the door and he comes in and Charlotte says, if you're looking for your brother, he's not here. And even my favorite part, yes, the words are fantastic. The script is expertly written, beautifully written. And this is the first time when the words "I love you" or "sharing a devotion" did not make me sad that I didn't hear it. Was when we heard these. And I know I said before that I was a little sad that he didn't give more, but that doesn't mean I don't love the way this is scripted.
Right.
And it's beautiful. But what I really love here is all the nonverbal. Charlotte doesn't say anything past, "I thought you were going to London."
Right.
It's just her facial expression changing and altering as Sydney says what he has to say. And even Sydney's facial expressions changing and altering as he gets out what he feels he needs to say to her. And it's really, really beautiful. So if you guys, while you're listening to this, if you want to pop on that scene or if you watch the scene afterwards, seriously do it because it's the nonverbal is so much better than the dialogue, which is saying something. But he says, "I'm not looking for my brother, I'm looking for you." She says, "I thought you would have gone to London to be with Mrs. Campion." And he says,
she's already left.
She's already left. I decided not to join her. Why not? And he said, because I decided I would rather be here.
On reflection, I realized I would rather be here.
And she looks at him confused. And he stares at her for a minute, then he looks down, takes a deep sigh, and he says, "I'm a great deal less than perfect. You've made me all too aware of that." Still, she says nothing, but it cuts away to her face. And as I think she's starting to realize what's coming. And then he says, okay, I don't want to get this wrong. I don't want to paraphrase this person. What does he say after that?
He says, "But for whatever it is worth, I believe I am my best self, my truest self when I am with you."
I love the way he stilts it because he says, "I believe I am my best self, my truest self when I'm with you." So it's almost like he's trying to prolong this moment, not only to give the full impact of what he's saying so that she understands what sacrifice he's doing in saying this and what he's actually meaning by saying this, but also prolonging his time with her by saying that. Because it's not like he can hang out with her after he says this. That's not how it works.
And also, I think it probably, as he's speaking it, he's clarifying. Mm-hmm. I'm my best self, my truest self.
Yeah.
When I'm with you. And
that is all. That's the part that I could do without. Like, could you have just maybe given her a nod with a smile and stared at her for a minute and then turned and walked out? It's the same thing in the new Pride and Prejudice. That's my preferred version because I feel like it gives the real Mr. Darcy. But when he says, "I love you," and she says, "Well then," why? Stick in the moment. Don't say "that is all" and turn and leave, because that's not all. There is
I think more. He's saying that's all I have to say right now.
I know, but I don't think it is. I think that's all he can get out.
Would you rather he said "to be continued" or "good night"?
No, he said nothing.
Yeah. well, whatever.
I would rather he would turn and look at her and they would make eye contact for a few minutes. And then he would do that little smirk smile thing that he does so well. And then give her a nod and turn and walk out. That's what I would prefer. Which he does all that, but he also says, that is all. So just cut out that.
And I love the way that they show her sort of trying to steady herself on that table.
Yes.
You know, because wouldn't you? I would be, after what they had just been through, for have him come in and say that, you'd be bowled over.
And what's crazy is that, yes, this has been a work of 7 episodes, but for Charlotte, she's only really understood her feelings for an episode and a half at the end of episode 7, because it's not until at the ball that she actually realizes. So it's not even half of episode 6. It's like the last 20 minutes of episode 6. So it's like 1/4 of episode 6, and all of episode 7, she knows what he feels for her. But in that short frame of time, there's been a high and a low, and then a high and then a low, and then a really low, and then a really big high. So it's poor Charlotte.
Ups and downs. It's the rowing and ups and downs. And Will.
Episode 7 is just a day, and she's experienced 90% of those emotions in this one day.
Yeah.
So I feel for Charlotte there. Yes, I would steady myself too after that, because I don't think that I could mentally receive everything that happened. I don't think I could do it. So next week is both, not next week, our next recap, which will be in a couple of weeks, is going to be both my favorite and my least favorite episode.
All in one.
And if you had asked me before season 2, before Theo's announcement actually was announced, I would say that doesn't matter. Season 2 or episode 8 is my all-time favorite, because they're going to be together. But knowing that they're not going to be together makes it just the worst thing ever.
Bittersweet.
The end is just bitter for me.
But it's why you say it's split, because the part of it is very sweet. Mm-hmm. It's more like sweet and bitter.
Yes, exactly. So I think do you think we missed anything? I think we covered pretty extensively. Our recaps are always like an hour and a half long, guys. And our recaps are one of the most watched things on our show, on my channel. So I think that they don't mind it being an hour and a half long.
Yeah.
But I think too that this is one of the reasons I wanted to create the podcast, is because I wanted to dig deep into these episodes, into the feelings, into the thoughts behind it. And there's not really anything out there that does that. I think a lot of our fandom for Sanditon, I think that they just want to dig deep with somebody.
Right.
Because they live, eat, and breathe the show.
Well, it's my favorite thing talking with you about them.
Exactly. See? And so it's fun. It's nice. Next time I need to make sure that I have my water, because doing 3 podcasts a day is like, my throat is so dry. I have to keep muting myself to cough.
Sure.
But I don't think we missed anything. I think we hit almost every single scene. It certainly hit all the important scenes, all the nuanced things. If you have not watched this show and you're just hearing about it from this podcast, please go watch this show.
What are you waiting on?
Exactly.
And in our area in Puget Sound, Western Washington, the local PBS station began rebroadcasting the series tonight.
Really?
At 7 o'clock.
If ours did that.
I don't know.
I'll have to look
yeah,
into
but
that.
they're rebroadcasting it. Channel 9 is rebroadcasting it.
Okay.
It started at 7. Sometimes they also repeat that in like 2 a.m.
Mhm.
I don't know if they're doing it tonight. I haven't noticed, but
yeah, ours does it again at like 11. But if you did see it once when it was on current syndication, if you've just been longing to see it again, you can find it on Amazon Prime. You can buy the DVDs. You can, I'm sure there's a lot of PBS stations that are starting to run it out in syndication right now, because the second season should be out. We've gotten a lot of significant hits saying January of 2022. So they'll probably be running this up until the second season comes out, and hopefully January.
Yeah, so, this is easily the 3rd or 4th time that it's been run in this area, if not more.
And if they're smart and they want to get people watching PBS, they're just going to keep running. So I mean, this brings in views. I don't know why it was ever canceled. There's bad decisions. But if you have not watched our interviews with cast and crew, we've got a couple out there. We've got one with Paula Byrne, who's the literary supervisor on Sanditon. She's a Jane Austen aficionado. Check out that one. We've got one with Kate Ashfield, who plays Mary Parker. We've got one with Rob Jarvis, who plays Old Stringer. And we've got one with Ollie Blackburn, who was the director on episodes 1, 2, and 3. So if you guys haven't seen those, we also have all episodes 1 through 6. If you have not seen our recaps, go back and watch them. You can listen to them on our Podbean channel on YouTube, because our next recap is our very last recap until the next seasons come out. And we got to talk about how we're going to do those too, because we're going to have one every week that is new and current that you and I are going to have to recap. So we have recaps you can go back and watch. We've got a whole bunch of character spotlights you can watch. We've done it on Charlotte and on Sydney and on Tom and Mary and a whole bunch of others. We've done a lot of character relationships, which is like Sydney and Charlotte, Mary and Tom. We just did one on Esther and Babington. So go back and watch those. If you want to reach out to me and ask me any questions about the podcast, or tell me something you'd rather see, something you don't like seeing, you can email me at the.sanditonchronicles@gmail.com. You can go to our Facebook group, which is the Sanditon Chronicles, Sanditon Family Fan Club. On Twitter, I am at Sanditon the, and on Instagram, I am the.sanditon.chronicles. I'm trying to be better about posting there. Still not there yet, but trying to be better. And you can, of course, listen on Podbean or watch on YouTube, which you're doing one of these things right now. So good job, you. But remember to subscribe and share. And the more that you do that, the more we can give you content you want to see. And we actually want to start doing giveaways and contests and things like that for watching, especially with the new season coming up. We'd like to give away some swag. So we can't do that unless we have more people who are watching. So on that note, we're going to go and we'll see you next week. I'm not sure what next week is going to be about. I honestly don't remember. So tune in next week and we'll see you again real soon. Bye, guys.
Okay. Bye.